If you're taking the T7 exam soon, this video goes over all the tips you'll need to do well on the math section of the T7 exam. I'm Ashlee from Smart Edition Nursing, and you'll want to make sure you stick around for the entirety of this video so you can learn how to avoid missing points on tricky math questions, know which conversions and formulas you'll need to memorize, and more. Before we get started, I know studying for the T7 can be overwhelming and difficult, which is why you need the T7 online course. You'll get everything you need to pass the T7, guaranteed, and you'll feel confident and supported in our study group, the mobile app, and our interactive course. For any of these math concepts that I'll be reviewing today, our T7 course has individualized videos, lessons, and tons of math practice questions to practice these specific skills. You can get the course at smarteditionacademy.com. So let's get started. I want to go over all of the different topics you can expect and some tips and tricks to help you along the way. So basically how this is going to be broken up is I'm going to give you a tip or trick and show you some practice problems that you can apply it to. So something you'll want to know about the T7 exam is that only a 4-function calculator is provided, but it can help you with a lot more than you think. So a question like this says there are 168 hours in a week, and Carson does the following. He sleeps 7.5 hours each day of the week. He goes to school 6.75 hours 5 days a week. He practices martial arts and basketball 1.5 hours each 3 times a week. He reads and studies 1.75 hours every day and eats 1.5 hours every day as well. Estimate the remaining number of hours. So some people see the word estimate and automatically think that it might be easy or that you don't really need your calculator to help you. But I would definitely use my calculator to help me with this question. Before I go through and do it, I would probably want to round each of these numbers to something nice and easy to work with. So 7.5 hours, I would probably round to 8. So he's sleeping about 8 hours each day of the week times 7. Goes to school 6.75 hours. Let's round that to 7. 5 days a week, so times 5. Practices martial arts and basketball 1.5 hours each 3 times a week. So let's round this to 2. And he's doing that 3 times a week, but that's for each of his activities, martial arts and basketball. We're going to multiply that by 2. And then he reads and studies 1.75 hours. Let's round that to 2 every day. So this is times 7. Then he also eats 1.5 hours. Let's round that to 2 times 7 every day. So this is where your calculator can come in really handy. You don't have to do each of these things in your head. You can just plug it in your calculator. 56, 35. 2 times 3 is 6 times 2. You would get 12. 2 times 7 is 14, and then 14 again. Now we have all of these numbers here. I'm just going to circle them so we see what we're working with. We have to add those all together. Okay, so 56 plus 35 plus 12 plus 14 plus 14. Just plug it in your calculator, and you'll get 128 total hours. Now, this question said estimate the remaining number of hours. Well, how many total hours were in a week? 168 minus the 128 he's using. Again, plug it right in your calculator, and you're going to get about 40 hours remaining. Okay, so there's one way that you can use your calculator. A question like this is estimate, will still be much easier if you use your 4-function calculator. So again, 4-function calculator means we can add, subtract, multiply, divide. Okay, again, how could we use it to help us if we need to change 5/6 to a percent? I'm just going to write this a little larger. Okay, when I see a fraction, my brain thinks of division. This fraction bar is really just a division symbol. So this is the same thing as 5 divided by 6. To turn it into a percent, it would be a lot easier if I had it as a decimal first. So when I plug this in my calculator, I'm going to get the decimal 0.83, and then will be 3 repeating. So you have a lot of 3s after that. Now, to turn it into a percent, we're just going to multiply by 100. You could just write in your calculator, multiply by 100, or if you'd like, you can swoop your decimal twice to the right, and you're going to get 83.3 repeating, which if we're just, looks like we're going to the nearest tenth here based off my answer options, you would get 83.3% as your answer. So again, we're just using our calculator to make this question easier. Okay, another tip is that most conversions are not provided and will need to be memorized. Okay, at Smart Edition Nursing, we give you the conversions that you will need to know so that you don't have to go search in a million places. We'll give them to you so you know these are ones that I need to memorize. So here's an example of a conversion. Let's convert 8 gallons to pints. So in our conversions, you might know right off the bat that there are 8 pints in 1 gallon. Okay, 8 pints in 1 gallon. So what we would do is we would do 8 times 8 to get 64 pints. Okay, you take the gallons, multiply by 8 to get to your pints. 64 pints would be my solution. If that's not one that you know or have memorized, you may also be able to use other conversions such as quarts. Can you go from gallons to quarts? Okay, in 1 gallon, there are 4 quarts. Okay, and then from quarts, 1 quart, to pints, you would know that there are 2 pints in 1 quart. So this is another example of a set of conversions you might know that would help you solve this problem. You also will need to have a bunch of formulas memorized. Okay, you'll need to know them, you have to memorize them, and know how to use them. So geometry especially are the formulas you'll need to know. They include area, perimeter, volume, surface area. You'll need to know them for triangles, for circles, for three-dimensional shapes. So here's an example of a three-dimensional shape question. A right triangular prism has a base area of 63 square inches and a height of 10 inches. What is the volume in cubic inches? So to find the volume, okay, I need to know the volume formula. So volume for any prism can be written like this: the area of the base times the height. Okay, so this is area of the base times the height. So in this question, it happens to give us exactly what we need. Area of the base is 63 and the height is 10. So all I have to do is 63 times 10. And I get 630, and it would be cubic inches for my volume. Okay, so you're going to need to know a bunch of formulas, have them memorized, and just know how to use them, know how to input the information you have into those formulas. Okay, here's another tip for you. You can use your multiple choice answers to help you when you can. There's a process of elimination, which is a great strategy to use for multiple choice options, which allows you to get rid of unreasonable answers right off the bat. Let's look at this question, for example. Ron is training for a marathon. If he trains by running 57.5 miles every 5 days, then about how many miles will he run in 43 days? So if I wanted to use the multiple choice answers to help me, maybe use process of elimination. So I would want to round this. So I see 57.5 miles every 5 days. He's running more than 10 miles a day. I'm going to round to just about 10 miles per day. And in 43 days, if all I did was just take 10 times 43, I know he's running at least 430 miles. The only answer that is greater than that, because really this is more than 10, okay, would be 480. It's really the only reasonable answer, okay? I could definitely get rid of 60 and 120. Those are very, very low. And 300 really is too low too. So I could get rid of all of those answers. If I wanted to do this a little bit more accurately, I would just take 57.5, divide it by 5, and get that he's running about 11.5 miles a day. Multiply that by 43 and you get 494.5. And the closest answer to that would be 480. So either way you do it, you're using the most reasonable answer to help you. Okay, another tip for these multiple choice questions is to read through all answer options to ensure that you're choosing the best answer. Sometimes multiple choice answers may seem right. They might look good. So you want to make sure that you're not skipping over a solution that is even better of an answer. Okay. Sometimes you get stuck between two and you want to just make sure you look through all of the answers to choose the best possible option. So let's look at this interpreting graphics question as an example. The graph shows the amount of rainfall in inches for 12 days. Which statement is true for the line graph? Okay, so it's a little bit hard to see. Zoom in a little bit here. So we have rainfall in inches and the amount of days. So which statement is true? I'm going to go through each one and see if they're true. It rained more than 1.5 inches more than half of the days. So 1.5 would be somewhere over here. So that definitely doesn't seem like more than half of the days they got more than 1.5 inches of rain. The average amount of rainfall was 1 inch. So 1 inch would be like right here. Could that possibly be the average? I could go through and find the average by adding them all up and dividing by 12. It doesn't look unreasonable, so I'm going to pause. I'm going to put a little question mark here, and let's check. It rained every day. So is that a reasonable thing? Was it always greater than 0? And it looks like every day 1 through 12 was greater than 0. And then lastly, the amount of rainfall steadily increased. If it steadily increased, you'd see something like this as the trend, and that's not what's happening here. It's going down and then up and then down and then up. So I would not agree with that. So the only one that is an absolute yes is number 3. It rained every day. Okay, if we hadn't kept looking through our answer options, we might have thought number 2 was reasonable and just chosen it. So that's why we want to be really careful. Okay, so again, still talking about these multiple choice questions, all of the answer choices can be tricky at times because if you make one mistake, like in this example here, we're going to look at order of operations. Maybe you add instead of subtract, or you use a cube instead of squaring something. You just make a little bit of a mistake. That wrong answer tends to be an option, so you need to be careful. So if I'm looking at this expression here, okay, evaluate the expression. I need to do order of operations correctly. This is a PEMDAS question. Parentheses, exponents, and then multiplication, division, and then addition and subtraction. So if I'm doing this correctly, I would do parentheses first. So I get 4. And then no exponents, so I can do multiplication and division. So it's just 5 times 4, which is 20. And then addition and subtraction, I have to make sure I go left to right. So I'm going to get 27 minus 9, which should give me 18. That's the right way to do it. What if I had made a mistake? Okay, what if I had done this incorrectly to start? Like, let's say, for example, I added first. I didn't follow order of operations. I would do 12 times 1 plus 3. Let's just say we did that too. 4 minus 9. Well, 12 times 4 is 48. 48 minus 9 would give me 39, which is an answer option, but it's not the correct one, okay? So we have to be really careful because sometimes we make a little mistake and we still get an answer that is one of the choices. Okay, a little long-worded, but let me talk through this tip for you real quick and we'll look at an example. So I want you to be really careful and read through all of the directions on your questions, especially for the questions that are fill in the blank. Okay, sometimes there are some new questions that aren't just straight multiple choice. You might have to fill in the blank or rearrange the order of different, like say fractions or decimals. So for this case, let's talk about filling in the blank questions. You don't want to get the question wrong just because you entered it incorrectly. There's some very specific directions they will give you for how to enter it. You want to make sure you reread the question so that you can ensure your answer aligns with the question they're asking. For example, they might tell you to round to the nearest tenth. They might want you to use a leading 0 before your decimal or leave off trailing zeros at the end. Okay, you have to look for those directions to make sure that you don't get an answer wrong when you already knew how to do it, you just entered it incorrectly. So it might look like something like this, okay? A personal trainer charges her clients $50 per hour for the first hour of training and $20 for each additional half hour of training. One of our clients had a workout on Monday for 1.5 hours and Wednesday for 2.5 hours. How many dollars was the client charged? Fill in the blank and enter the amount in this format. Round the answer to the nearest cent. Do not include a dollar sign. So to solve this question, you would want $50 for the first hour, plus it's going to be $20 for each additional half hour. So let's see, she did the first hour here and then 1/2 hour. And then 2.5 hours is 5 more half hours. So we're going to need to do 6 half hours times that $20 per half hour. When we do this, we get 50 plus 120. I'm getting $170. Oops, plus 120 equals 170. Now, how am I going to enter this if I need to round it to the nearest cent and not include a dollar sign? Well, I'm going to have to write 170 decimal 00. No dollar sign, and you have to put the cents in there because it asks you to round to the nearest cent as well. So this is how you would enter your answer to ensure that you get all of the points. Another tip for the TEAS exam is that you need to be comfortable with rounding. You might need to round to the nearest whole number, the nearest tenth, the nearest hundredth. You will need to use this for multiple choice and fill in the blank questions. So here's an example. Let's convert 1/6 to a decimal. Round to the nearest hundredth. So we did one similar to this where we had to take a fraction and turn it into a percent. This time we just need to turn it into a decimal. So what I would do is I would use my calculator to help me. Remember, fraction bar is just division. And when you plug this in, you would get 0.166666 repeating, okay, to the nearest hundredth. So I need to know that I have my 10th place here next to the decimal and then my 100th place. So I'm rounding to 2 decimals. I'm going to look at the number next to that place, which is a 6, and that tells me to round up. So I'm going to round my 6 in the 100th place up to a 7. So to the nearest hundredth, I would get 0.17. So you want to be comfortable rounding. I always use the little rhyme, 5 or more, let it soar. We're going to round up. 4 or less, let it rest. We're going to stay where we are. So with this example, we looked here at this 6 to tell us, should we round up or stay? That's more than 5, so we have to round up. Okay, so here's a big one. I know some of us, word problems are not our favorite thing, but we need to be prepared for them. So be prepared to solve word problems. Know keywords and phrases that help come up with a strategy to solve the questions. Beware of extra or unnecessary information in word problems so that you don't get distracted. Okay, so let's see an example of a question like this. A candy shop charges 50 cents a piece, knowing it costs 22 cents to make. If the shop has other costs to the business that total $4,200 a month, how many pieces of candy must they sell to break even in the month? So there's a lot going on here. This question is not easy by any means. I'm going to take out the important information. So they charge 50 cents a piece. So when we're talking about the revenue that they bring in, okay, I know it's going to have something to do with this. It costs them 22 cents to make. And if the shop has other costs to the business that total $4,200 a month, how many pieces of candy must they sell to break even? Okay, so I think what I might do here is I might figure out how much they're profiting on each piece. So they're selling it for 50 cents. It costs 22 cents to make. This looks like 28 cents in profit. Now, if we take that 28 cents and multiply it by, let's call that X, the number of pieces of candy that they sell, that needs to equal their other expenses of $4,200 a month to break even. Okay, break even just means they're going to be equal. Now to solve this, once I have it written out as an equation, it's a little bit easier to know what to do to solve. We're going to use opposite operations here, inverse operations, and we're just going to divide. Another example of when using your calculator will be super helpful. 4,200 divided by 0.28. This will give me 15,000 for X, which means they would need to sell 15,000 pieces of candy. So some of the things that I did here to solve this word problem is I pulled out, what do I know? Well, I know that they're charging 50 cents a piece. I know it cost 22 cents to make, so that allowed me to find their profit. I know that break even means that their profit is going to have to equal their expenses. So their profit is 28 cents per piece, has to equal their expenses of $4,200 a month. Once I had that equation, then I could just solve it. Okay, another tip for you, let's switch gears and talk about graphs. So when analyzing graphs, make sure to note the title and labels. Sometimes the label may give you information that you need to solve the question. For example, the graph might show quantities on the axis, and it might say like 1, 2, 3, 4, but the label will say in millions. So that really means 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million. That can at times help you solve questions. Okay, you also want to make sure to practice reading different types of tables. Frequency tables, XY tables for algebraic expressions. You might see dot plots, bar, line, circle graphs, lots of different examples, okay? So here is a question for a type of graph you might see. Students surveyed about their favorite pet, and the bar graph shows the results. If each were to represent 3 students, how many students were surveyed? So let me just zoom in a little bit. So this question is wanting me to find how many students were surveyed. So if I go to dog, okay, it looks like that goes to 12. Cat, 16. Fish, 4. This looks like this would be 5. Bird, 9. Gerbil, 4. Pig, 1, 2, 3. So this is what my graph shows me, but each represents 3 students. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add all these together. 12 plus 16 plus 5 plus 9 plus 4 plus 3. Once I find the sum here, I'm going to multiply it by 3 because each of these is representing 3 students. So I'm getting 49 times 3, which gives me 147. So I have to be able to read the graph to figure out the values that are given in the graph, but then also make sure I read the question correctly to see that each one was representing 3 students. So this graph is actually showing 147 students' favorite pet. Okay, we also want to make sure we practice reading different types of tables, right? So we mentioned that before. This is an example of a table. This is a frequency table. This table shows the weight of 100 laptops. Find the mean weight to the nearest hundredth of a pound. So this frequency table here is basically just telling me the weight and then the quantity of laptops that were that weight. So to find the mean, we need to find the average. We're going to need to add all these together and then divide by the 100 laptops that we have total. So the quickest way to do this using the table would be to multiply 3 times 35, okay, and you would get 105. 4 times 24, you'd get 96. 5 times 19, you'd get 95. 6 times 11, 66. 7 times 11 would be 77. And then add all these together. Another great time to use your calculator to add all these together. And I believe you get 439. So to find the mean or the average, you're going to take that 439 total weight and divide it by the 100 laptops that were in this graph, in this table, and you would get 4.39 as the average weight. So remember, it asks us to run to the nearest hundredth. Luckily, it already is to the nearest hundredth here, so we don't actually have to do anything further, and we're all set. A new type of question that you'll see on the TEAS are sort order questions. So for example, you might have to put fractions or decimal as in order from least to greatest. So you want to reread the question to ensure you're putting them in the correct order. You don't get any partial credit, so all parts of the question have to be correct in order for you to get it right. So what that might look like here is, say you have a question like this is more of the old way that they might ask it, which fraction is the greatest. Okay, the new way that they might ask you is to do this from least to greatest. Okay, you might have to sort it from least to greatest. So I'm not actually using a sorting tool right now, so I'm just going to rewrite these and then we'll sort them together. So again, 5/6, 1/2, 2/3, and 1/6. We're going to sort them from least to greatest. So For me to do a question like this, what I would do is I'd probably turn it into a decimal. And remember, when we're talking about fractions, that fraction bar is really just division. So 5 divided by 6, I'm just going to round a little bit, 0.83. 1/2 is 0.5. 2/3 is 0.6 repeating. I'm just going to put it as 0.6 and then 0.16. So from least to greatest. So let's find the one that's the least. That would be 1/6. That would be, you would sort that first, 1/6. And then 1/2. And then 2/3. And then last but not least would be 5/6. Okay, that's in order from least to greatest. So this would be the way you would answer it if it was a sort order question. The original question just said which fraction is the greatest, which we also figured out here. You could just figure out that would be 5/6. So again, just be aware in those sort order questions, how are they asking you to sort them, and make sure that you double check so that you're getting all of them correct, because you can't get any partial credit. Okay, something else that can be really helpful when we're talking about word problems, or especially in geometry problems, is we want to draw pictures and diagrams to help solve problems when we can. So again, I find this especially helpful for geometry. So let's look at an example of that. A half circle has an area of 45 square centimeters. Find the diameter to the nearest tenth of a centimeter. Use 3.14 for pi. So a half circle, okay, looks something like this. Has a diameter, what we don't know. Say find the diameter. So I'm just going to do d equals question mark. But we do know that the area is 45. Okay, so when I'm talking about area, I'm talking about the whole inner part here. And I need to know the formula for area. So area of a circle is pi r squared. But hopefully by having this picture, I'll remind myself, oh, well, we're not doing a full circle. We're only doing half. So we're going to divide this by 2. So I'm going to plug in what I know. I know my area is 45. It's telling me to use 3.14 for pi. And I don't know the radius, so that's what I'm going to solve here for. Don't have a lot of space here. So I'm just going to multiply each side by 2, get 90, and then divide by 3.14. So I'm going to get r squared is, let's see, about 28.7. So when I take the square root of both sides here, I'm getting that r is about 5.4. So that is my radius, okay? That's my radius. That's half of the diameter. So to find the diameter, I'm just going to double that, okay? So the diameter would be 5.4 times 2, or 10.8. Okay, but drawing the picture would allow me to then also use the formula that I have to memorize correctly. So you want to be comfortable with order of operations. We already touched on this a little bit before, but we want to know how to use PEMDAS. So for multiple choice questions, again, the answer options are meant to be tricky. So if you do something out of order, you may still get an answer that is one of the options. So let's look at one more example of those. Let's evaluate this expression. So I'm going to write in my PEMDAS again here, parentheses, exponents, and then multiplication, addition, multiplication and division, left to right, addition, subtraction, left to right. So let's evaluate it correctly first. Okay, so I want to do parentheses. 3 times 4 is 12. Now I'm going to do exponent. 6 squared is 36. Now I have no multiplication, but I'm going to do division. 12 divided by 2 is 6. And lastly, I have addition. I should get 42 as my solution. Okay, I did it correctly. I got 42. If you made a mistake here and did something out of order, just want to show you how they always put in these answers to trick you. So what if, for example, I did this exponent first and I got 36 plus 3 times 4 is 12 divided by 2, okay? What if I added these, because I'm going left to right, and I got 48 divided by 2? That would be 24. That's not correct, but it is an answer option, so you have to be super, super careful, okay? So I really want you to be comfortable with PEMDAS. If this is something you struggle with at Smart Addition, we have plenty of videos to help you with this specific topic and more, of course. So another really big topic on the TEAS is converting percents, decimals, and fractions. So sometimes it can be easier to solve a problem if you convert a fraction to a decimal, for example. Also, when you're doing algebra with percentages, you always have to turn that percent into a decimal. So you can just do that by dividing the percent by 100 or just moving the decimal place to the left twice, okay? So you want to be comfortable with converting between percents, decimals, and fractions. So here's an example of that. Let's change 7/4 to a percent. So we talked about a question like this earlier. Let's look at it again, see if you remember. When I have fractions, I'm going to think about this as a division bar. 7 divided by 4 gives me 1.75. Okay, that's the decimal version. Now, how do I turn it into a percent? I'm going to multiply by 100. Okay, which is the same thing as, let me actually write it this way, swooping the decimal twice to the right, and I get 175%. This question would also have been a great one to use your multiple choice answers to help you. If you know with fractions, okay, a top-heavy fraction, where, see how I wrote it here? The 7 on the top is bigger than the bottom. The numerator is bigger than the denominator. That means that this number, this fraction, is going to be greater than 1. And when we're talking about percents, that's the same thing as 100%. So I know that this has to be more than 100%. So the only one that fits that is 175. So that's just another way that you can use your multiple choice answers to help you. Okay, how about this one? What is 15% of 240? So how do I do percentages? In algebra, I need to turn them into decimals. So 15%, swoop to the left twice, is 0.15. I can just multiply this by 240 by using my 4-function calculator, plug it right in, and you'll get 36. Okay, so you need to be able to turn that percent into a decimal before you can actually do the algebra. Okay, so you want to also know how to calculate mean, median, mode, and range. You may need to do this from a set of data, from a table, or from a graph. So this question asks for the median value of the data set. So the number of service upgrades is shown for 20 employees, and we need to find the median. We need the number that's in the middle. So we always want to put our data in order from least to greatest. So I already went through and did this to save us a little time, so I'm just going to write this out. So there's 3 10s, 2 11s, 2 12s, a 13. I see 3 14s, 2 15s, 2 16s, and then, all right, 17, 17, 18, 18, and 19. So I've got 20 digits here, 20 pieces of data, I mean. So now in order to find the median, I'm just going to cross one off at the beginning and one off at the end and try to find the number that is in the middle. All right, so I'm left with these two numbers here. I need to find what's in the middle of those two. Since they are the same number, the median, which would just be the average of the two, is going to be the same as well. So the median here is 14. Okay, but if they were different numbers, you would just take the average of the two. So that's how to find the median, which is the middle. If you had to find the mean, that would be the average. The mode, MO, I remember as most often, which one happens the most. Range is just max minus min. So you may need to find that from a set of data like this or from a table or a graph. Okay, here's another tip for you when solving algebraic equations. If you have to take the square root to solve, don't forget that you'll be left with both a positive and a negative solution. For example, the square root of 9 is plus n minus 3, so it's a negative 3 and a positive 3. Because if you take negative 3 and square it, you will get positive 9. So when solving something like this, x squared equals 81, and in our heads, we want to think, okay, how do I find x? Well, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So I need to know the square root of 81. It would be plus or minus 9. So you have to know that it's both. Very important. Okay, and last but not least, here's a mnemonic that can help you when you are converting within the metric system. The metric system is super, super important for the TEAS exam. You want to be really comfortable with this. If it's something you struggle with, I hope this helps you. So the mnemonic here is King Henry died while drinking chocolate milk. And if you've watched my videos before, you may have heard me talk about this. It's one of my favorite mnemonics to use. This mnemonic stands for the prefixes of our metric units. The W I use for whole, like the whole unit, grams, meters, liters. Okay. And here are our different prefixes. So how do I use this? Well, if I need to convert 7.5 liters to milliliters, this is basically telling me what to do with my decimals. So whole unit, I'm starting with liters, which is a whole unit. I'm going to milliliters. So I'm going to, oh, sorry, this says millimeters. This should say milliliters. Okay, so let me do that again. Okay, so we are starting with liters, going to milliliters. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 to the right. So if I take 7.5, I'm going to move my decimal 1, 2, 3 to the right, fill in my spaces with zeros, and I get 7,500 milliliters, okay? King Henry died while drinking chocolate milk. Super, super useful tool to use. Okay, so I hope you found all of these tips really helpful, and this gives you a place to start for your exam. The best way to prepare for the math section of the TEAS and knowing what to help with is to take a math practice test. I've linked a free math practice test below. The practice test will tell you what you need to study when it populates your score at the end, so it's really helpful for you to zone in on what you really need help with. Okay, I want you to remember you don't have to prepare for the T7 alone. The T7 online course has a supportive community, mobile app, and includes an interactive study course that's easy to follow, guaranteed to help you pass, and will help you feel confident. So you can get your course at smartadditionacademy.com. Thank you so much for joining me today, and best of luck on your exam. I hope to see you soon.